They call it Story Monday.
Howdy, Jennifer Batten here with another episode of Cat Saw This One Time, a Cat, where I dig into memories and old scrapbooks. And any picture that I see that has a story, I'm gonna tell it. Now, way back in episode 8, I talked about Nicolas Slonimsky, the Russian musicologist genius that I got to befriend when he was 96 years old. Well, I just found some pictures of his 97th birthday when I bought him a stripper. Yep, I did. There's a last time for everything. I had a bunch of my friends over to Nicholas's house. She came at a certain time, knocked on the door, we let her in. She turned on the boombox and started dancing. Nicholas had the time of his life and told all of his friends about it. And at the memorial, his doctor said, "Boy, you were really lucky that he didn't die that night." He actually lived another 5 years till he was 102. He had a medical record that was about that thick. And there wasn't a whole lot of blood and oxygen running around the body at that point. So bringing a stripper in was, it was questionable anyway. Here's a picture just before breakfast when I had a slumber party and brought a bunch of girlfriends over to his house to listen to his stories throughout all of his years. And here he is with his cat named Grody. He was good friends with the Zappa family and named his cat Grody to the max. It was so funny to listen to that little old man's voice yelling for the cat, "Grody!" And here's a little memento I got for Nicholas. We took a bunch of pictures, of course. I gave him this cutout so he could put it on his piano and remember forever and have something to show his friends for proof. Here I am taking a photo op in Nicholas's bed. We tucked him in and then the rest of us talked for another 3 or 4 hours till we passed out in the living room. And I was thinking, now how do I top a video where I was covered with 150,000 live honeybees? And I came up with the brilliant idea of walking on hot coals. So the record company dug in, found somebody that held those kind of ceremonies where you walk across hot coals, and we went up a mountainside. I remember all day I was trying to collect my energy and try to psych myself into thinking that I wouldn't feel anything. Well, about 2-3 feet into it, it hurt. And the super sucky thing about it is the camera crew overlit. So it just looks like I'm walking on dirt. So it was never released. There's a last time for everything. Kind of like the time I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane in New Zealand. Here's a little gem that I dug up recently. It's a picture of me and my best friend in 5th grade, Kathy Najimy. I used to go to her house all the time and have dinner and listen to her sister play drums. Then she grew up to become a nun in Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg. She also appeared in Descendant and does a lot of voiceovers and other acting gigs. Now I'm taking you to the way back machine. When I was a teenager, I worked for Burger King for about 3 years. The focus here is every musician's nightmare, receiving bad checks. Kermit DeVoe. He was a great singer. He was in a wheelchair, and he would pop wheelies on the dance floor and write a hell of a lot of bad checks. If you're in the music business, you could probably relate. That was not the first or last time that happened to me. And another thing most traveling musicians can relate to is the broken guitar. I was on tour with Jeff Beck when this happened. We were about to take our seats in business class, and I took my guitar on board all the time when somebody decided he didn't want me to do that. He said there wasn't enough room in the overheads. So he took my guitar in a soft case, said he'd take full responsibility for it. I got inside the plane, and then I found there was plenty of room for the guitar. When I got off the plane, the headstock was snapped off. I asked for the guy that said he would take full responsibility for my guitar. He wouldn't get off the plane because he knew he'd be missing teeth. Pearl was my first family kind of band, where I was with them for several years, and we went through playing fusion, playing weddings, playing cover tunes. My favorite ad that we put out is something I couldn't find. We advertised free sushi, and then when people came to the club, the leader got on the mic and said, "Yeah, that free sushi, his name is Alejandro Sushi, and we're taking donations to set him free." This one was back in the days where I was a little more obsessed with practicing than I am now. You could iron with the right hand while you're playing scales with the left hand. Try it. I also used to have a miniature guitar when I was teaching at Musicians Institute. It was about 40 minute drive from my house to get down to Hollywood, and I would keep my left hand moving while I was driving with the right. This was my polyester nerd phase. I had no hope of looking halfway hip until Michael Jackson got a hold of me. My band Pearl went through a lot of phases over the 3 or 4 years we were together. At one point, we decided to have Halloween 4 or 5 times a year. We would be in cahoots on the phone and decide it was going to be Halloween. And the worst thing was being the first person to show up at the gig, because we really stood out from everybody else. One night, I was playing with Pearl, and I recall we were playing Synchronicity 2 by The Police, and I decided to get a little too physical. I jumped up in the air planning to come down on the bridge, and when I landed, my knee dislocated and fractured. So I was in a world of hurt for a little while. I ended up getting knee surgery because they wanted to pull the bone chip out. They said most likely they'd find it and I'd be up and walking the next day. Well, they couldn't find it. So I have 4 puncture places where they tried to find it with a scope. They couldn't find it, so they opened up the whole knee and went diving. I remember it so well because it was such a surreal moment when my knee dislocated and I started to fall. I went in slow motion and I was looking up at the band. I couldn't understand why they were continuing to play, because in my world, that was the end of the song. My favorite local guitar shop when I was a teenager and in my 20s in San Diego was called Guitar Trader. And they had the coolest thing where they would have a contest. They would have locals write in and vote for their favorite guitar player. I never even thought about it. I was just aware that certain people would win, like Warren DeMartini, who ended up in the band Rat after that. After I had decided to leave San Diego and finally make the move up to LA, because everybody said you gotta be in LA if you want to be in the music business, I was all packed up and ready to go when I got the call that I had won in 1984. That was a great send-off. Pearl was a really fun band. All of us are still really tight after all these years. We went through many phases of comedy and weirdness, and this is one of my favorite looks, where the drummer is wearing his girlfriend's bikini top and he put a rubber band around his nose and his lips. Quite the attention getter on stage. At another point, he wore his girlfriend's Denny's uniform backwards, so the zipper opened up and showed his hairy chest. He was a different kind of a guy. Drummers. I just ran across this from a photo shoot that I did that ended up being used for the cover of my debut record, Above, Below, and Beyond. This was a painting done by Pamelina. You can find her at pamelina.com. She does a lot of paintings for guitar companies and has painted a bunch of my guitars and jackets. I've bought a few of her original amazing paintings. The attention to detail is just phenomenal. Pamelina painted my Firewalk guitar, and I remember the day I went to see her. It was one of those days where I had a ridiculous to-do list, and I ran to her house to give her the ideas, and she drew up my feet with amazing precision in no time flat. It was really impressive. Here's a photo probably a lot of guitar players who have graduated from music school can relate to, especially if your parents paid or helped pay for your education. When you come home for Christmas, they want to hear some music. Most of the stories so far included some stories about Michael Jackson and touring with him over the Bad, Dangerous, and History tours. This is the only tour photo for this storytelling episode. I took a shot with Lisa Marie when he was married to her, and I will never forget it because as we were smiling and taking the pictures, she said, "So you're the controversial one." I still to this day cannot understand it, and my only guess is that I was doing a lot of press for my own records at that time. Word came down from the boss that he didn't want me to do that anymore. I have a feeling there was a journalist that wrote something questionable as if I said it. I didn't. I was always very careful when I did interviews. I knew people wanted to get salacious information on Michael, and there wasn't any, so I would steer them away from that and said, yeah, it's really cool to work with Michael. And now, my record. Let's talk about the first track.
what they need. Shit, I slap upside the head.